What the heck? I don't get it. When I went to a town I don't usually visit for shopping, I witnessed my husband and my mother walking arm in arm, intimately and kissing in public without any regard for the onlookers. Shocked, I rushed over to confront them, but far from showing any remorse, they defiantly justified their actions. I immediately went to my parents' house, told my father about the two, and got a divorce. However, after my father passed away, I had to meet my mother and ex-husband again. Seeing my mother for the first time in a while, she was wearing loose clothing, and her belly was visibly swollen. Noticing my gaze, she smiled triumphantly.
Oh, did you notice? I'm carrying a child. Seems like you waited forever but couldn't have one, huh?
Unlike you, we managed to have a child right away. Now I can finally become a father. Breaking up with you was a good thing.
They hurled insults at me, intending to hurt me as much as possible. However, their plan backfired. Unfortunately for them, I wasn't hurt at all. Oh, that's hilarious. You two are such idiots. I laughed so hard I had to hold my stomach. My name is Mia, and I'm a 24-year-old office worker. My parents had me when they were very young, in what you'd call a shotgun wedding. Both of them were quite flashy in their youth. My mother, Linda, was just 16, still in high school, when she met my father, Kevin, a construction worker 4 years her senior, and had me. Their love story began when my mother fell head over heels for my father and aggressively pursued him until he gave in, and they started dating. Soon after, she got pregnant with me, and they got married. Getting married as a high school student was frowned upon by society, but since my mother was already pregnant with me, they had no choice but to accept it. The early days of their marriage seemed to go well. When I was in kindergarten, my father would often come to pick me up on his days off from work due to rain.
Your dad is so young and cool. Right? I love my dad. He's so kind.
I loved walking home under the same umbrella with my dad, talking about our day. However, an incident struck my father, changing my mother's attitude towards him drastically. My father fell while dismantling scaffolding at work, sustaining serious injuries. Injuries include full-body bruising and complex fractures. When his body became disabled, my mother turned cold. Fortunately, he survived, but he was left with lasting physical impairments, making it impossible for him to continue his construction job. Thanks to rehabilitation, my father managed to walk again and, through a friend, found employment at a company. However, he needed long-term rehabilitation. During this time, my mother refused to have anything to do with him, from attending medical appointments to everyday assistance. She even ignored him when he fell in the hallway, or threw sarcastic comments his way.
Showing off by falling. Pathetic. Marrying this burden was a mistake. I should have dated more men before settling down.
When I was a kid, my mom would constantly grumble about my dad, as if it were her catchphrase. But to me, it just looked like she was picking on him. And honestly, I didn't really like her for that. Due to my father's limited work capacity, our family wasn't exactly wealthy. My mother worked nights, so I spent more time with my dad during the day and was closer to him than to my mother. Perhaps because my mother noticed this, or maybe she was never fond of kids to begin with, she mostly neglected me, providing only the bare minimum care. I managed to graduate high school, But instead of going to college, my mother told me to work to help with the family finances, so I ended up taking a job at a local company.
I'm sorry, Mia. It's because of my condition that you have to bear this burden.
Don't say that. I'm happy to work if it helps you, Dad. My father apologized for not being able to send me to college, feeling guilty. Although I hated to comply with my mother's demands, I worked hard for my father. A few years after I started working, I married my colleague, John. I didn't want a cold marriage like my parents had. I wanted to build a warm home with him.
I'll take care of you, Mia. Let's be happy together. I want lots of kids too.
I was so happy to hear those words that I accepted his proposal right away. However, a year into our marriage, there was no sign of us having children. I wanted children too, but no matter how long we waited, there were no signs of pregnancy. John started to pressure me, as if it was all my fault.
Damn. Why can't we have kids? All my coworkers already have children. It must be something wrong with your body. What a letdown for a wife.
Don't say that. It's not just my issue. I want you to come with me to the gynecologist for a checkup.
What? Why do I have to go through such trouble? I've always been healthy. Never even caught a cold. It's obviously your fault we can have kids.
My husband blamed me alone and wouldn't even listen to the suggestion of fertility treatment. Instead, he berated me for not being able to have children because of me.
Stop making excuses and get treated at a hospital already. It's embarrassing for me that we're married and can't have kids.
He wouldn't listen to me at all, just blamed me one-sidedly. Still clinging to a sliver of hope, I pursued fertility treatments alone, but there was no sign of us having a child. And then John started coming home less and less. He said he was busy with work and started coming home in the morning more frequently. Is it really work? Could he be cheating, now that I think about it? I had several reasons to suspect my husband. There were times when I could smell women's perfume on his clothes when he came home in the morning. Not just once, but several times. Moreover, when I checked the credit card statements, there were charges for unexplained expenses that further fueled my suspicions. However, I thought confronting him directly would only lead to evasive answers, so I waited for the right moment to talk, and that moment came soon enough. It happened when I went out to a town I usually don't visit for shopping. I saw my husband, although he said he had to work on this holiday. Is that John? But he's supposed to be at work today. I was about to call out to him when I noticed a woman walking beside him. What? Why is my mom walking with John? There, walking beside him with a smile, was my mother. Since getting married, I had distanced myself from my mother. I had visited my father at home, but rarely brought my husband there. There was supposed to be no contact between my husband and my mother after our marriage greetings. Curious, I watched them without calling out, and to my shock, they held hands and kissed right in front of me. What? This makes no sense. I ended up raising my voice. They didn't notice me, stunned, and continued walking away. Finally, I couldn't hold back and shouted, "Hey, John, Mom, what are you doing?" When I caught up and called them out, they were visibly surprised to see me.
Oh, what's the matter, Mia? You seem so flustered.
It's not, what's the matter? What are you guys doing?
What do you mean? I just happened to meet John here. So we were just saying hi, since it's been a while. Is there a problem with that?
It seemed my mother was pretending to be oblivious. Seeing my mother dressed youthfully, you wouldn't think she was over 40 if not told. And then, getting closer to my mother, I realized something. This scent, I've smelled it before. The perfume my mother was wearing was familiar. It was the same scent I smelled on my husband's clothes when he returned home late. I didn't want to believe it, but I was convinced that my mother was my husband's affair partner. Don't lie, I saw you two kissing just now.
What? You must be mistaken. We just bumped into each other, that's all.
When pressed, the two exchanged a fleeting look of panic, but after a moment of silence, John admitted defeat and spoke.
Oh, man, I never thought we'd get caught this early. Why are you even here?
What's that supposed to mean?
You're so oblivious. I thought we could have kept it under wraps a bit longer, but to think you were watching. Well, as you've guessed, I actually prefer older women.
Sorry, I did feel bad for you, but I've been into John since we first met.
My mom and husband unabashedly said something unbelievable.
We just happened to bump into each other one day, had a lunch, and, well, one thing led to another. I'm still young, after all, I want to experience love.
Our relationship was already strained, and as I confided in her, the more we talked, the more I was drawn to her.
Yeah, I heard about it. Mia. Having trouble conceiving, huh? John really wanted a boy. And because of you.
Can't believe you'd say that to Mom.
Well, it's true, isn't it? Your body's the reason we can have kids.
Unbelievably, it seemed my husband had shared everything, even our most private issues, with my mother. Struggling alone with infertility, my husband blamed me as if he were the victim, despite never listening to my concerns. Fury bubbled up within me, realizing there was no way I could continue this marriage. The audacity. Do you even realize what you're doing? I yelled at them, as they were nonchalantly making excuses.
Can't help it. It's because you're a failure as a wife and a woman.
Excuse me, I'm better off without a husband like you. I want a divorce.
Fine by me. To be honest, I've been over you for a while. Always excuses, no kids. I'll be relieved to be rid of a defective product like you.
Oh, I didn't intend for this to happen, but I guess I ended up taking your precious husband. Sorry about that.
Despite clearly not feeling sorry, my mother offered a hollow apology. Mom, if Dad finds out about your affair, you'll be divorced too. Be prepared. Her complexion changed upon my words, but she quickly reverted to her smug demeanor.
Well, like there's no proof of the affair. You and John getting divorced is your business, but I'll divorce when I please. Come on, John, let's go.
Urged by my mother, they left me behind in haste. Despite their affair, unlike John, my mother didn't seem eager to divorce my father immediately. I went straight to my parents' house and told my dad everything.
So, I endured all these years thinking you needed a mother, even if she was that kind of woman. But to disregard her daughter like this.
My father grimaced at my report. I'm divorcing John. I can't stay with him after what he's done. What will you do about Mom?
Don't worry, I have a plan. I won't let them have their way.
John later sent a completed divorce form by mail, which I signed, finalizing our divorce. My mother didn't return home after that, apparently eloping with John. Despite my anger, my father advised me to forget them both, and I decided to let go of my ex-husband and mother. I then moved out of the apartment I shared with John and returned to my childhood home. My father had become quite self-sufficient. Ironically, thanks to my mother's neglect.
Despite everything, I'm happy to live with you again. Thanks for coming back.
I enjoyed a brief period of peace with my father, but it didn't last. He contracted a widespread pneumonia and suddenly became gravely ill.
Mia, I'm sorry for all the hardships. Live your life as you wish from now on.
On the brink of death, my father firmly held my hand and told me this. Tears welled up as I nodded in agreement. Despite medical efforts, his condition rapidly worsened, and he passed away. Dad, I wish I had been a better daughter before you left us so suddenly. As I prepared for his funeral, an unexpected visitor arrived.
Long time no see. Heard he's gone.
My mother and John, my ex-husband, were there. They stood at the door with disdainful smiles, barging into the house. What do you want now? Just go away.
What? And who do you think you are? He and I are married, you know. It's only natural for a wife to rush over when her husband dies.
To think you'd say such a thing after eloping and not contacting anyone for years.
Oh well, say whatever you want, but no matter how much you scream and shout, I'm still his widow, which means I have a right to the inheritance. There was insurance too, wasn't there?
I can't believe it. That's why you never divorced Dad. After suffering an injury, Dad retired from his construction job and worked hard at a company he joined later, eventually reaching a respectable position before he passed away. Despite having no formal education, it must have been the grit he developed during his days as a craftsman. He had many subordinates who admired him for his caring nature.
All the more reason not to divorce. Now let's talk about dividing up the assets. He wasn't one for material desires, so I know he saved quite a bit. Let's see.
Mom said this as she approached me. Suddenly, I realized something. Mom, in her loose clothing, her belly was clearly swollen. Noticing my gaze, she smiled triumphantly.
Oh, you noticed? Yes, I'm carrying John's child. It seems you've been waiting for one you could never have. I'll bear the child in your stead.
Different from you. I had a child easily. Now I can finally become a father. Breaking up with you was really for the best.
The two of them hurled the most hurtful words they could at me. However, their plan backfired. Unfortunately for them, I wasn't hurt in the slightest. Oh, this is hilarious. Both of you look so foolish. I couldn't help but laugh, holding my stomach. The two of them looked at me, dumbfounded.
What's so funny?
Because it's ridiculous. Hey, I hate to say it, but are you sure that child is really John's? At my words, John asked, "What?" as if offended, but Mom's demeanor suddenly changed. Her eyes darted around, clearly flustered. But John seemed oblivious to it.
It's definitely my child. Don't say such nonsensical things out of spite.
Yes, that's right. Don't be sore losers.
Whether it's a sore loser's talk or not, this will clarify everything. I stepped away and retrieved a document I had kept, thrusting it in front of them.
What's this all of a sudden? What is this?
What are you so surprised about? It can't be that. Huh? What does this mean?
The two were shocked by the content of the document. It was a report from a private investigator detailing Mom's social interactions. After Mom eloped with John, I happened to see her in town. She was with a young man I didn't recognize, not John. Following them secretly, they entered a hotel together. What does this mean? Could it be that Mom is? I talked with my father before he passed and decided to investigate Mom's behavior. I thought it might be useful someday. The investigation confirmed that Mom was indeed involved with a man other than John. John, with a look of disbelief, frantically reads through the documents. There, detailed information about his mother and her boyfriend is written. John, reading the report with disbelief, glared at Mom next to him after finishing it.
What is this report about? Were you deceiving me?
That's absurd. Mia is lying. The baby is definitely yours.
Despite being flustered, Mom insisted the baby was John's.
Who do you believe, Mia or me?
Well, that's... Since you couldn't have a child, you're framing your own mother. What a terrible woman.
John was persuaded by Mom, regaining his composure. Declaring the report a lie, they turned their blame towards me, ignoring their own issues. You're free to believe what you want, but sadly, I have definitive proof. You can come out now. I called out towards the room next to the living room, where I currently was. Then the door opened, and a man walked in.
Who the heck is that guy?
Who? I don't know him either.
Both of them were puzzled by the appearance of this unfamiliar man. This man is my husband. It's natural you wouldn't know, but I remarried. His name is Bob. I had divorced John a year ago and remarried him, whom I met through a friend.
What proof does this man provide?
Unlike my mother, it may not be visible yet, but I also have a baby in my belly. Of course, it's his child.
So what? Say it clearly.
Still don't get it? I couldn't have a baby no matter how hard we tried when we were married, but with him, with Bob, I got pregnant right away. John's eyes widened as he seemed to grasp the implication of my words. You were too lazy to go to the hospital, but I got checked properly and knew there was nothing wrong with my fertility. So the problem with not having kids was you.
No, that can't be. You're lying.
But it's strange, isn't it? Supposed to be hard to have children, yet my mother is pregnant. I wonder if it's really your child. When I posed that question, John could not retort and glared at Linda next to him.
Hey, speak the truth.
Well, fine, you win.
Oh, you admitted it quite fast. I thought you'd try to deceive us more.
It was just a fling with John.
What? What do you mean?
I was with you because you were Mia's husband. You know, wanting what belongs to someone else. But my true love was another man. I was planning to break up with you soon.
John was shocked by his mother's words and stood dumbfounded.
I wanted to enjoy messing around with men until I got caught. Well, it doesn't matter. Whether or not the child I'm carrying is his, my right to inherit his wealth remains unchanged.
Are you still talking about that? Unfortunately, you'll have to give up on that.
What? How many times do I have to say the same thing? I wasn't divorced from my deceased husband, so I have the right to inherit.
That's what I'm telling you. You have no such right. because you and Dad were divorced a long time ago.
What? That can't be.
Maybe you've forgotten because you're getting older, but Dad had the divorce papers you filled out. When I reported my mother's affair to my father, what he took out was a set of divorce papers. According to Dad, after a major fight when he became unable to work due to an injury, Mom had said, "I don't need a husband who can't move," and thrust the filled-out divorce papers at him. Though he didn't submit them at the time because of me, Dad had used those papers to divorce her before he died. So, Mom, you won't get a penny of Dad's estate. Do you understand now?
That's impossible.
Seeing her face turn pale, the mother, who had been so confident just moments ago, is now visibly shaken. John was still glaring at her.
I'll be leaving.
After realizing her affair was exposed, and she wouldn't receive any inheritance, my mother fled the house as if escaping. Later, my mother gave birth to a boy, but it was clear, even without a DNA test, based on blood types, that he wasn't John's child. John saying, "I never thought she was such a whore," abandoned my mother when she no longer had any inheritance coming her way, and disappeared. The man my mother truly wanted, her affair partner, also fled upon learning of her pregnancy, as he was only in it for a casual relationship. In the end, my mother became a single mother at 40. She is raising a child on her own with no one to rely on, surviving on government support. Being an older mother, taking care of a young child was physically demanding, and she appeared significantly aged. I once saw my mother from a distance, carrying her child. Her appearance, now with more gray hair, looked more like a grandmother than a mother. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and now our family of 3 lives happily together. Thinking about it, my mother's child is my brother, and he will be in the same grade as my daughter, which is quite complicated. On the anniversary of my father's death, we plan to visit his grave as a family of 3. The betrayal of my ex-husband and mother was painful, but it allowed me to find an irreplaceable family. You're watching over us from heaven, aren't you? Surely, Dad up in heaven is rejoicing over the birth of his grandchild. Holding on to the love Dad gave us, we vow to continue walking closely as a family,